You're watching NEWSX. My name is Vineet Malhotra, and you are obviously tuned into that special slot in association with the business world, where we talk about AATMANIRBHAR and a lot of other issues which are doing the rounds when it comes to the Indian economy. Well, things are not hunky-dory at this point in time. A lot of challenges coming about every now and then pertaining to business, economy, and how trade and demand is supposed to go up. But obviously, we've been doing this for a while now, and we have been at the receiving end of a lot of good ideas. Obviously, some criticism has also come from certain avenues, and they feel that the government perhaps could have done more. What does the panel in today's show feel? We'll talk about that. We'll get into some granular details also as to what these ideas are all about and what more can be done, not only from the government's point of view, but from our point of view as well. If you are to be Atmanirbhar, that it doesn't mean that you have to look to the government to give you solutions. Perhaps you can come up with the solution and then look to the government for some sort of a support or motivation. So let's get into the deep end of this conversation. Joining me on the panel is Mr. Shrikant Shastri, Chairman of I3G Advisory Network, Mr. Aditya Mishra, Founder and CEO of Amorca, Mr. Subha Rao, Founder and CEO of Leo Partners, Mr. Akshay Chaturvedi, Founder and CEO of Leverage Education, Ms. Gayatri Bhatia, Founder and MD of Sorcery Foods Private Limited, Mr. Devashish Bhattacharjee, Co-Founder and CMO of Pocket52.com, and last but not the least, my partner in crime, Dr. Anurag Batra, who's going to help me out with certain aspects of the show, Chairman and Editor-in-Chief of Business World. Mr. Shrikant, if I can start with you. This is a question which has become customary to these sessions, but let me in fact retweak it today. The stimulus package was announced a few weeks ago. It blew hot, it blew cold. A lot of people felt that the government was perhaps extremely experimental with the way the economy needs to be revived. A lot of other people on the other scale of that bipolar unit felt that the government was in fact being very outgoing by giving away 20 lakh worth of contingent liability loans to MSMEs. Where do you stand on this? And do you think this periphery that India finds itself in alongside with the world economy is going to change anytime soon, or is this the new normal?
So Vineet, I'll give you a very honest answer to your customary question. My own opinions have fluctuated wildly over the last several weeks because, like everyone else, I get influenced by what I read in the media and what I hear from my friends. And those opinions, like everything else today, is so sharply polarized that I've been absorbing both sets of opinions. Just to take an example, one opinion is that it's a gigantic confidence trick being played on a desperate public with money that does not exist. That's one viewpoint. On the other hand, there are viewpoints that are positive, which say that, look, we're as good as what any other developed country has done, not just the 10%, but also we've been cautious. We've spent money on things that matter, poorer sections, healthcare, supporting small businesses, and variety of other support like tax reforms. And we've been cautious about not throwing money away. And every other, people have misunderstood and said, is cash being given out? No, it's not just about cash being given out. It's about making available money for things that matter at this point of time. So finally, when I sat back and looked at these two sets of extreme opinions, I said, look, I'm going to look at data points. The real test for me is this money or benefit percolating down? So I looked at two areas which I'm familiar with. One is MSMEs, second is startups. Now, let's take MSMEs, and you also alluded to that. 3 lakh crores of emergency credit line to give working capital, 50,000 crores of equity infusion through a fund of funds. Now, I have anecdotal evidence. I have many friends who are MSME owners. And I'm hearing from them, both in Delhi and smaller cities, that they're actually getting the money. In some cases, the bank managers are calling them and saying, would you like a line of credit? To me, that is real outcome. Likewise, I engage with hundreds of startups, and there was originally criticism that there's nothing for startups in the stimulus package. But there's one significant change that the government made. They changed the definition of MSME. So today, many startups can register as MSMEs and get the same collateral-free loan, which was otherwise not available to them. And this to me is real benefit. I was not surprised when one of the newspapers, New Indian Express, published a survey which said 71% of Indians agree or agree strongly that the relief package will lead to economic recovery. So that's where I stand.
Shrikant, I just want to ask a follow-up question while we go to everyone. Shrikant, you've been an entrepreneur, you sold your business, then you invested in businesses. Now, there is a real worry, while the two scenarios you mentioned are real, that a lot of startups' revenues have gone down to zero in certain sectors, whether it's QSR, whether it's travel, every sector that is a contact-led sector. So, and also the funding hasn't come through. So if there are no revenues, if there is no funding, there is a worry that a lot of startups may not survive the next 60 days. How real is that worry?
You know, that worry is real, but I'm on the boards of several incubators and I've done Zoom calls with hundreds of startup founders who are worried. They're worried, but I saw in them a certain amount of grit and boldness which said, we shall overcome. That is one. And it's not just a hollow claim. A lot of them have pivoted to gear up for the new world. And if you give me 2 minutes, I'll give you a simple formula that I think is really going to be transformational in this context. The short story is that over the one such startup was in the robotics space, and they were facing real death when the lockdown got declared. But they transformed and said, you know what, we're going to make a world-class ventilator for India that does not exist. And a bunch of us got together to take them from idea to manufacturing in under 3 months. And that ventilator is now ready to, it's been certified, tested, approved. It is ready to take on the world. And that story to me is a story of how startups will overcome this. They will pivot. They will get mentored by a completely new breed of people. Government was willing to support with a variety of grants while conventional VCs held back their money. Corporates were willing to come forward and support with CSR. And suddenly, you know, the big thing was this startup gave a manufacturing license to 2 MSMEs and 1 PSU, whose idle capacity started getting filled up through manufacture of 1,000 ventilators. So here for me is the real AATMANIRBHAR Bharat. You had a startup who reflects Startup India. The startup is called Noka Robotics. They started working with MSMEs, so they connected with MSME India. They started manufacturing in India, which is Make in India. So Startup India plus MSME India plus Make in India together has now created AATMANIRBHAR Bharat, and they've created 100 jobs. I can see every startup working with the government, with MSMEs and others to actually transform themselves. So I am filled with a lot of hope and confidence, Anurag.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, Mr. Aditya Mishra.
That story, you know,
yeah.
Stories can inspire other people to do similar.
Absolutely, and Anurag, we've had different opinions on the same platform where people have spoken about not being able to get loans from banks. You know, forget about state-owned banks. They have also spoken of private banks not extending them any kind of loans. Mr. Aditya Mishra, if you can hear me, where do you stand on this? Should we be worried or should we be optimistic? Should we be, in fact, be taking this nudge that that COVID-19 has given us, something that can capitalize, monetize, and take the economy further? And the Atmanirbharta concept, which the Prime Minister has also promulgated on a number of occasions, also is perhaps in the same breath.
Sure. So I think number of things. So first thing that you mentioned is that banks are actually not giving out money. So yeah. I'm not an expert on MSME. We work a lot in the home loan side. And I can tell you that it's actually easier on the PSU bank side compared to the private bank side. So there has been a tightening of credit norms. So certain parts we have seen that they continue to get tightened. So which means that same income ratios that used to get you a loan earlier don't get you a loan anymore. In fact, there are cases where loans have been sanctioned and those sanctions have been revised downwards, or the customer has been told, look, you can't get a loan. And that lands the customer in a difficult situation because he's already made the down payment for a property against an earlier sanction letter. So that tightening is certainly hurting a segment of the customer base. So I think that's a given. The good thing is that on the PSU bank side, we don't see a similar tightening. In fact, interest rates are at their lowest in the probably last 20 years. So if you look at it, you can get a loan of even, let's say, 5 crores, 2 crores, 1 crore, any amount for as low as 6.9%. So affordability has really gone up, and you see that it's the PSU banks which are out in the lead, which are giving out these loans. So that part has actually improved. Now coming to Atmanirbhar Bharat, I think there is a stimulus and there's a thought that is going on right now. I think there is a lot more that needs to be done before we get to a place where we can say that we have even the base ready for it. So some of the examples that we have already talked about are really early about it. I think we need to think systematically about it. And while the government has come out with certain things like credit guarantee scheme, which one side protects their own balance sheet, at least from the face of it, though there is, I think, a risk that they will get hit later. On the other hand, it's probably not doing enough for a lot of people. So I think the next phase of that is to, I think they really need to pick up certain areas and say that, look, this is where we really need to build up supply chains. So today, if I look at it, your auto supply chain in India is fairly strong. Where we are lacking is essentially on the battery side. And given the global situation, there is an entire feeling that we shouldn't be sourcing from China. And that's not just in India, it's there in the US as well. I think that's where government needs to come out with measures which support the formation of that industry, and the rest of the auto industry combined can kind of take a step towards being part of the global supply chain. Similarly, on the semiconductor side, you could have an entire investment, a lot of push that is coming from the government to get things going. If you look at China, part of the reason why China dominates a lot of manufacturing is because they invested in that area. And today they are far ahead when it comes.
Though it gets manufactured in Taiwan, and one of the reasons you see the American troop movement in the rim, in the Asia Pacific rim, is because the Chinese, suspect that the Americans have told the Taiwanese not to give them the semiconductors and the material associated, because that semiconductors run the world. The chips run your phone, they run your power. So those 7 manufacturing locations in Taiwan produce 90% of what is produced in the world. So right now, Americans' warships are protecting that Taiwanese against Chinese.
South China Sea, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's, you're right, semiconductor. So we'll come back to you on one particular thing on demand. When you look at the housing loan segment, when you look at the data that is coming out in terms of home buyers, give us the trends from April till June.
Oh, okay. Demand totally disappeared. Okay. I think there's no two ways about it. And we ran all kinds of data. And I think there's a bit of data that's fairly publicly available. You look at Google Trends. The other thing that we looked at is that you look at the region side. So what's the journey of a customer of a house? We even start by saying that, hey, let me figure out what's available in the market. So somebody buying in Kandivali, he will go do a search on Google, then he will land up on housing.com, 99 acres and all that. And then from there, he will shortlist something, he will visit, and then he will kind of try and shortlist and then finally buy. If you look at the data, that number shows very clearly that where you were in February, there was a 60% fall into April. But from there onwards, at least on the traffic side, there has been a bounce back. So you're almost back at the March level if you look at the June data. It's still not back to where you would want it to be. It's not back at 100%, but it's almost back at 90%. So very clearly, if you look at that data, there is a V-shaped recovery that's already in process. Is it showing up?
And what do you attribute that people are wanting to buy new homes? Because millennials have realized that they need to spend a lot of time in their homes. So for the first time, they're spending more time at homes and they feel that they should invest in it, or they save so much money that they're investing in it. What is your hypothesis on that?
No, my hypothesis is this, that there was a continuing momentum that got interrupted. All we are seeing is that there is a resumption of it. I don't think we should read more into it. I think there are interesting trends that are there. So if you look at Bombay, what's selling more is, let's say, in a Virar or a Kalyan. And if you look at, let's say, the numbers that Godrej Properties, for example, reported, a lot of those sales have actually happened, let's say, for them in Kalyan. And I think that's also
housing or low end of the housing for self-use is being picked up. That's seeing an uptake in demand. So we'll come back.
So let me add one thing.
Aditya, we're having
some problem with the audio there. We'll go to Mr. Subba Rao now.
Whoever you want to bring in.
Right, Mr. Rao, if you can hear me, sir.
Yes, I can.
Well, more or less, the question remains the same. The challenge is to get the demand back, and the idea is also to reignite the sentiment of the consumer. What kind of a challenge?
And the forecast for enterprises, because Mr. Rao, you're on the recruiting side. You recruit, so jobs is a good barometer of economic activity. If these jobs are being created, that means economic activity is happening. Tell us, how do you see the economy going forward? We know in the last few months there has been a lot of jobs, both in the formal sector and in the informal sector, that have gone away. What is your outlook for jobs in the next 3 to 6 months?
Mr. Rao?
Yeah, 1 second. I think I lost.
We can hear you loud and clear, sir.
We can hear you loud and clear.
You can respond now.
Yeah,
Mr. Rao, are you ready? We can't hear you. We'll come back to you, Mr. Rao, if you're not ready.
Let's
back to you. In sorcery, you found your sweet spot or a silver lining in this dark cloud. Tell us, as an entrepreneur, does the economic stimulus mean anything to you? Where do you see the economy going? What are the consumer habits that have changed for permanent? And what are the consumer habits that are only temporary and will possibly go back to old ways when COVID is gone?
So, I mean, of course, when the economic stimulus package was announced, it was welcome news after almost 2 months of complete uncertainty, right? The focus that has been given to MSMEs with the 20 lakh collateral-free loan, 20 lakh crore collateral-free loan, 20,000 crore collateral-free loans and the 3 lakh crore credit line has obviously been beneficial to MSMEs across the board. However, I think the question really arises whether the objective of the package is being met in terms of the people and organizations that it was meant to benefit. So, despite such a large stimulus package for the MSME space, we've seen that over 70% of startups have actually been really badly hit, and 12 to 15% of startups have actually even shut down. And I personally am aware of a lot of startups which have actually shut down as well, so I know of their stories. For us, of course, we found ourselves, in a sweet spot where, given that we are from the packaged food industry, consumption patterns have changed dramatically, and there's been a significant shift in demand as people are consuming more packaged foods in the comforts of their own home, right? So this is actually a golden opportunity for businesses like us, where there's been a massive organic increase in demand. And given we are a natural product, we're actually perfectly positioned to be one of the greatest beneficiaries of the new macro environment, and also to restructure our demand and reach directly to the consumer to cut out the middleman. So overall, this is a great opportunity for us to, relook at the way our balance sheets and our P&L is currently structured, where our revenue contributions are coming from also. And as I mentioned, increase the savings in our own organization by cutting out the middleman, which typically takes a very fat chunk of a margin. Even large-scale established companies in our space of packaged foods have seen over 120% increase in their retail sales, despite deep penetration across the country. So I'm extremely bullish about our specific sector and about the current times. However, there are two challenges rather which are yet to be fully addressed. Firstly, the supply chain struggles still exist across the board, as transportation has still not fully come back on its feet. So even whether we're talking about, so given that we manufacture fresh sauces, we deal with a lot of farmers, right? So farmers are not actually able to transport their fresh produce to our factory locations, which is becoming a bit of a challenge, although, we are finding our way around it. And the other issue which ties back into the stimulus package also is with regards to working capital. So even though we have burgeoning demand at present, we do require the capital to cater to that demand. Receivable cycles have also been badly damaged at this point.
Absolutely.
which is a bit of a concern for us, especially.
And you don't know the quality of your receivables. You'll possibly know that in the next 60, 90 days. So I understand running an enterprise. I know where you're coming from. I think we'll come back to you. Akshay, you represent a sector that has really exploded. The edtech sector has benefited possibly the most in the pandemic.
Right.
As parents, we know that edtech is the lifeline to our children. So tell us,
Right.
as an entrepreneur, what do you make of the stimulus package and where do you see the Indian economy going?
No, sure. First of all, Anurag and Vineet, thank you so much for having me here. Absolute pleasure. Good to see you, Anurag, after a long time. Let me kind of divide my revert to this into two broad comments. First one about where we are in the macro, in line with, I think, what Vineet asked right in the beginning. I think India, we have to recognize the fact that India is a developing economy. And if we look at things from that lens, I think we have done a fantastic job. Be it with the stimulus terms of making sure that the economy does not completely tank down. If you look at what's happened with a bunch of other countries out there, if you look at any other developing country, if you would compare an apple-to-apple macro data, you can clearly see the difference. So of course, our aspirations as Indians are, we want Moon and Mars and Venus and whatnot from here. But if we really compare the data, I think we have done a really good job, and kudos to the government for that. So I sit on that other side of the debate. That said, of course, there is a lot more that can be done. And I think we are learning around it. Every few weeks, we see that there is another announcement. And I would rather see it as a fact that this is a government that is observing what is happening globally, that is observing the data that is essentially coming on directly from the ground. From audience and constantly improving what can be done and what can't. Coming down to the word of startups, I think, of course, when the lockdown began sometime in March, April, there was a negative sentiment for sure. But I think that's completely been quenched out given the demand that we have seen. So I'm again on the opposite side here. We, we run a college admissions company, Leverage Edu, consumer, making money from students and parents. And we've essentially seen our monthly revenues grow by 100% from previous 3 months to now. And in fact, we have put out 100 plus job openings earlier last week. So we are, of course, I understand there are some sunrise areas and there's some sunset areas, but given that we have been in an area which is essentially sunrise.
Studying and watching movies.
No, of course. Correct. So that is about largely my space. We see that students are very keen to go out and continue with their education. Of course, given the fact that we are an online company, it has given us a great chance to catch up with our brick and mortar peers. I love this quote where this quote that says that you can get ahead of the car in front only when it's raining. And in our case, it's pouring. So it's given us a great chance to get ahead of all of these brick and mortar cars who are out there in front of us. And just to kind of wrap up some comments, I wanted to revert to them about the startup area per se. Again, I think, and again, maybe my comment has a bias given the education space, but I think the working capital lines, the loans, the funding, I think all of those are available. And the sentiment has largely improved for all areas in the last 15 to 20 days. The venture community largely is run by sentiment. You don't essentially see it mirroring the public sentiment, the public equities. You don't see it mirroring everything that is happening out there in the world, be it a war, be it
the correlation between
tanking down. The community works very differently.
The whole debate by itself, and we still don't have a
absolutely
on what. But
yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
There is you look at the Dow yesterday. In America, there are signs, there are green shoots of
absolutely yes.
Look at the valuations of some of the tech giants in the last 2 days. They're coming back to their peaks. So I think there is some demand coming there. And of course, the sectors that you mentioned and the sectors represented on this panel have done well. Coming back to Subbarao,
Thank you.
How do you see the economic stimulus and jobs, as I said, is the right barometer for looking at the economy? Where are we headed?
Okay. Well, good evening, all the members on the panel, and thanks, Anurag and Neet, for having me here. See, as we know, I mean, the stimulus package which was announced by the government is, of course, a pretty welcome sign. And of course, you know, there are a lot many people who actually have taken it as a mixed bag. Though some people say, you know, it has to basically percolate into, you know, what exactly accrues to a certain beneficiary. But nevertheless, I would say that the sentiment is positive, and people today would know that, you know, when we're talking about, you know, government specifically talking about, say, MSME, you know, there's a 3 lakh collateral free, you know, loans available there. Available means, I mean, it's not cash, as one of the panel members has rightly said, but you can avail of that if you follow a proper channel, you know. So now the government has got a little liberal, and you know, if you follow the latest report post the stimulus package, the sentiment, when I was reading the, you know, latest FICCI report, the sentiment is certainly positive. As Mr. Akshay Chaturvedi has rightly said, you know, he belongs to one of the sunrise sectors. And today, as we all know, many of the, I mean, I'm actually mixing up the job front. You know, if you look at, there are many industries who are, you know, let's say, badly hit. And there are many industries who suddenly started doing very well. I mean, today, if we talk about the core sector, see, we are an executive search company. We typically, you know, help corporates get their talent from the mid to the CXO level. But if you look at the scenario overall, also the core sector got badly hit. I mean, if you talk about core engineering sector, say automobile sector, and when you say automobile, it's a huge chunk which actually affects the rest of the other sectors also. And the worst hit is again, you know, automobile ancillaries. If you talk to anybody today, they say our hiring, our recruitments are freeze for next 6 months. What happens is that any market sentiment going down, the very first casualty happens to be recruiting. Because
in my view, first is travel, second is advertising, and third is recruitment. In my
recruitment.
I keep saying, we need that in good times you should advertise, in bad times you must advertise.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I'm with that one.
Anurag, just to add to that point, you know, I'm talking about what, you know, a government, or for that matter, you know, everybody who is in a public domain should need is, you talked about advertising. I would say it's a common norm in the corporate world. Everybody knows that in the peacetime, you have to communicate effectively. In the wartime like this, you have to over-communicate.
Sure, I agree with you. I agree.
What happens is
being connected, being compassionate,
absolutely,
being communicative. I mean, I have 300 colleagues that I work with, and I keep saying this shall pass. Let's go to the last panelist,
Mr. Debashish.
Debashish, you again come from a sector that has seen some impact. What are your opening views on the stimulus package, and where do you see the economy going?
I'll basically come back to the question, but I'll basically pick up from what we are experiencing, and especially I'll go ahead with what Akshay had mentioned, that we are in the sunrise sector. Rather, in our industry, I would say that the sun never sets in the gaming sector. That's what we have experienced. That's how I would put it. And recently, what we have experienced, that Pocket 52, my company, has become world's 4th largest poker company, and this has happened for the first time by an Indian company, which it is there. And I believe a lot of you panelists must not be even aware of what exactly poker is. That is one part of the story. The second part of the story here is that, like, we today I saw a media article whereas in like Airtel and Reliance, like even they are coming into the real money gaming sector because everybody is seeing how things are working. Like you see 700 million hours like being consumed by Indian gamers. Now we believe that we are the next movie sector. The gaming sector is going to be the next OTT. It's going to be the next entertainment. It's going to be the next wafer thing. It's going to be the next discussion. And that's how like gaming is going ahead. And how it is happening, like people playing Ludo. Like I do not even represent Ludo.
I read the stats, people playing Ludo online.
My mother called me a few days back and told me that just install the Ludo King app and let's play Ludo together. And she stays in Guwahati, I stay in Bangalore, and that is how the things.
Love it.
And that is a very beautiful way of putting things together. But yes, our industry, the gaming industry, I represent a different version of the industry, that is the real money gaming industry. And it's been like.
Right?
I'm sorry, could you just repeat? You guys broke.
You also call real money gaming fantasy.
Sir, fantasy is mostly into wherein like you would call the cricket part of it, which is badly been hit. But we represent the strong real money gaming sector.
Clearly, I don't play poker. I don't play any fantasy game, but I'll start playing games also. But I want to ask you, are your consumers paying for the games? Are you getting enough advertising? I want to focus on the business side. For example, in media, while the viewership of all news channels, including NEWSX, has grown, the revenues are not commensurate, except platforms that are only digital. So, are you seeing also an uptake in the revenues, or it is only traction in the number of users?
We are in the middle of this special show in association with the business world. Devashish, before we took a break, you were on the verge of answering Anurag's question, but I interrupted you. Now is your turn to, in fact, respond to that very interesting question that you asked.
Thanks, Vineet. Thanks for getting me back. So I'll basically start with a very important keyword in the real money gaming sector or in the gaming sector. It's all about liquidity. And which means, like, if I break it in a very basic way, it's that how many people are playing on a platform at that particular moment. Otherwise, nobody would come and play. It's as simple as that. So in our case, we are India's first company. We came up with a new concept called network. In that network, we have clients like MPL, like Calling Station, Nostra Gamers. They are all in our network. We have powered them with the software. What happens is that people from their platform and our platform, they can all play synchronized at the same point of time. So at a point of time when we made our software 1 year back, around hundreds or 500 people would play. Now you would see around 5,000, 3,000 to 5,000 players playing real time, and it's all happening at a synchronized position. And what we have seen with regards to our growth, we have grown by 20 to 30%, especially during this particular time. And one day somebody came to me and said that, okay, do you know that you are India's #1? I said, how? Then they showed me a particular panel and they told me that this is how they see the real-time things. And we were awestruck. And while coming back to a certain situation, I'll just a little divert from the situation. It's very hard today, especially for entrepreneurs like Akshay and me, at our level, at our stage, at our age. When we open LinkedIn, it's flooded with people who wants to take up a job. And it's very, very tough every day to handle such situations. But we are accommodating even people who may not impact right now at this particular situation. But yes, we are accommodating them and we are trying to scale it up. Now, well, coming down to the government policies and government doing a lot of other things, definitely. But as a gaming association, we haven't seen connects right now happening at this particular moment because it's a little complicated and it's a little controversial, I would say. So that's all how I can summarize Mr. Anurag as of now.
Yeah, but I just want to ask you, are you also seeing revenues? One is user traction. Are you seeing revenues in terms of advertising or if the games are paid?
See, I'll say you in our sector, basically the advertisements, I'm talking about the paid model that we are doing. After doing so, we have seen good amount of growth in that particular section. But what we have realized is that our revenue is not soaring, but going it's bumping up. As I told you, 20% for the traction. Maybe I'll meet you one day and I'll tell you the percentage one-on-one. But as of now, I can definitely say that yes, it's skyrocketing and sun is not setting here. Sun is there at the back.
Good to hear such stories because these give us hope and they tell us that we have entrepreneurs who can do it for India, in India, whether it's in a service sector or in manufacturing. Gayatri, coming back to you. Again,
Anurag, just last thing I would like to conclude my perspective here is that it is a request to all the panelists and people who are also watching. If you know people who are looking for job and they can just get in touch with us. We are always ready to help them and understand because we are from the gaming sector. We have good networks.
That's a very good thing. And I'll personally send you 5-10 CVs every day. I will
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
But that's another discussion. Gayatri, coming to you, since you are in the consumer and let's say food segment, tell us, some demand is a given. What are you doing as an entrepreneur that is getting you the delta? Of course, we know that brands like yours are a D2C, a direct to consumer, and maybe you will be part of the Prime Minister's vision of being, farm to fork, so to say. So tell us what's happening in your sector and what does it augur for the agriculture sector? Because we are the largest producer of food grains in the world, and there are two tweaks that the government has done in terms of one, now you can sell your produce in any market. There's one market. And second is in terms of making sure that the government is working with farmers to make sure that they're able to get better prices. The first one is, so tell us how will your sector contribute to the growth of GDP?
So in our sector, in the F&B, in the food processing space rather, as I mentioned already, we've seen a lot of increase in organic demand in any case. We are actually...
Because people are not going out and they're eating at their homes.
Exactly. So there's just been a shift in demand. Most people believe that most F&B packaged food products are seeing an absolute increase in revenue. However, this may not necessarily be true simply because a lot of processed foods actually rely significantly on HoReCa, which is hotels, restaurants, and caterers, to be their main revenue channel. At this point in time, however, given the macroeconomic situation where most restaurants and hotels have actually chosen to stay shut even where they have been given permissions to reopen, that entire revenue channel is completely paralyzed for now. So to cover that delta of, whatever revenue you were originally pulling from your hotels, your restaurants, your caterers, your other institutional sales, there's been a lot of innovation in terms of reaching the market, in terms of the distribution networks that have been employed. So to give you an example, we ourselves are actually at this point engaging with a pan-India company which has deep distribution throughout every metro city, about 40 cities in India at this point actually. But they are not from our industry. So this is a cross-industry tie-up which we're doing, where we're leveraging their distribution network to be able to reach consumers across the country. So as long as entrepreneurs are able to identify...
It's not just D2C, it's an omni-channel approach that you are taking.
Exactly. So we're extending ourselves from we were never just B2C, but we were also, we do supermarkets, we do hotels, restaurants, etc. Now we're also extending that to say, for example, making our product available through a fashion e-tailer, right? Now, if you're available through a fashion e-tailer, typically people may not necessarily think that food would be available on a fashion e-tailer. However, we were still able to see demand coming through from there, and more importantly, we're able to access markets which we are otherwise not able to access given our own limitations of cold chain and whatever else. So I think interesting tie-ups is what really is the need of the hour. Entrepreneurs really need to be focused on just getting their product to the market, especially in the F&B space, because I think the demand is still there, and the demand is massive, and like I said earlier, it's only shifted right from the institutions to direct home purchase.
Just to understand, is the average size of an order grown in the last few months, and if it's grown, by how much?
Absolutely. We've seen the average order ticket growing from, say, 2 units from a direct to consumer perspective, 2 units per order to sometimes even 8 units an order, 10 units an order. Well, the actual average has grown from 2 to about 8.6, but that by itself means, that customers are basically getting on, for example, when they purchase directly from our own website or any of our online partners, they're purchasing the entire range that we have available. So they're just stocking up. It's a bit of a hoarding mentality, but it works fantastically well for us. And people are able to utilize the products fast enough. And this is being seen for not just sauces companies, but also, say, packaged rice, different types of pastas, different types of beverages also, because people are just consuming at home now, and they're looking for
that tells you that there is, for essentials, for food, it continues to be a very strong marketplace. Shrikant, I want to ask you about the real elephant in the room is liquidity.
Yeah.
Do you see, as an entrepreneur who works with MSMEs and who's been an entrepreneur who understands money and the role of liquidity in kind of oiling an economy, where do you see the liquidity 3 to 6 months from now?
So, because I'm not an economist, one of the things I do is to go around talking to a lot of people and absorb like a sponge. And the best advice I've got is from someone who's a guru of strategy. He's a very accomplished professor and consultant in the US. Very simple argument. He said, only when people get back to work and start earning income, there will be money in the market. In order to get people back to work, you need to overcome a fear psychosis which prevails. Unfortunately, the fear psychosis will not go away till vaccines and treatments are proven. So he recommends two things actually. One, as individuals, all of us need to ensure that we do what we can: mask, social distancing, sanitizing, keep ourselves physically fit, and support anyone around us who is poor and vulnerable. The government can ensure that you open the economy, have a national mandate for mask and social distancing, ensure there's a safety net for the economically weaker section. If you do that over the next 60 days, and I'm confident that notwithstanding the small spikes in lockdown in Karnataka, etc., as we open up and people start figuring out that when I wear a mask and you also wear a mask, I'm not going to infect you, you're not going to infect me, we will start going back to work, all of us start earning, there will be liquidity. That money will get spent in the market. We will spend with Devashish on gaming, we will spend with Akshay on something else, and there will be liquidity in the market.
So the government will hire people through him.
And Subbarao will hire people, exactly. That is the magical answer.
But it's a very simple and very straightforward that when people make more money, they spend, because then the sentiment is better. And right now you're saying there is a fear factor of people going to offices, people going out to malls. I think there is a real fear factor, though the government has tried to do its best to deal with it with the measures that you described. I'd like to go back to Aditya. Aditya, the traditional saying was roti kapra makan. The garments sector is not doing well at all. It's just the more roti. You just shared about makan, but if
and internet probably it's roti, internet, and makan now.
Oxygen. Internet has become like oxygen, connectivity. Because with flexi working, I won't call it work from home. I'd call it flexi work. I think internet connectivity has become like a lifeline. I mean, if Castaway was done today, it would need to have an internet connection. Tom Hanks would possibly search for the biggest Wi-Fi connection and then kind of find a way to be Castaway. But Aditya, coming back to the Indian economy, when you look at data, what is your forecast for the next 6 months? Because when you look at people inquiring for housing loans or actually actualizing housing loans, what is it that you are seeing?
So again, I'm not an economist, but I can comment on the basis of the data that I see. And I think there are two sets of data that I see. One is home loan data. Second is the actual housing purchase data. So on the home loan side, I think the demand has shifted completely to home loan refinance. So there is a massive demand for somebody saying that, look, I am at 8.5, the new guys are getting it at 7%, why shouldn't I refinance? So I think a large chunk of demand that we see right now, which is originating, is a big chunk is actually just that. In fact, I talked with somebody at Mint on just this part, where this entire process is running slow, but we expect to speed that up. So to put numbers there, I think a lot of that movement is towards the PSU banks and HDFC, and looks like more than 70% of what's hitting them is refinance and not really the new purchase kind of a demand. Coming to the new purchase demand, as I mentioned earlier, that if you look at the marketing sites, the traffic seems to have bounced back, and Anurag very correctly pointed out that, look, user back doesn't mean revenue back. So if you look at cost per lead for a real estate developer or a broker had fallen by more than 50% in April. It is still down by around 20-25%. So it's not that you have a full recovery there. It's not as competitive as it used to be. Now, if I look at that demand that's hitting the marketing side, is it coming to the developers? Answer is that there is a fair bit of lag. Whether that lag is 4 weeks or 8 weeks, I think time will tell us. But right now, if I look at it on a weekend basis, when the lockdown ended here in Bombay, the next weekend was absolutely vacant. There was hardly anything happening at the sites. Part of the reason is that customers don't want to come out and they're looking at digital channels. And I think real estate developers have also responded by creating a lot of digital channels. So if you look at, let's say, Piramal, they have launched the first of its kind purely online experience. You can do a site visit, you can figure out which flat you want to buy and completely buy it online.
I was talking to the founders of the top 3 prop tech companies, and they said between them in early June, they had done 7,000 sales of homes purely through virtual walkthroughs, demos. So, they did share some data with me. What you're essentially saying is that there is a refinancing of existing home loans and there's some part of new demand. So clearly, you can't say that the demand is fully back. Coming to you, Akshay, now EdTech has created more digital divide than digital democratization, if I may say. If you look at Maharashtra schools, 92% of the Maharashtra schools till 4 weeks back were not able to get their students, so to say, virtual classes. So tell us, in future, do you see the digital divide getting bridged or do you see it getting wider?
And if I can supplement that question, do you think that the government also had a vision about involving the rural areas more when it comes to online education? What kind of role do you think that the government can play in that?
You put me in a tough spot, Vineet. I'll come to the second part in the latter part of the answer. But just to begin with, I think, of course, doing classes on Zoom is not the answer. It's not EdTech. Just by having teachers populate WhatsApp groups and mark attendance and have kids who don't have a computer at home, who have one mobile device probably between 2 or 3 kids, I think that is not EdTech completely. That is definitely not the future of online education. So, of course, if we are to move to a more online, if I want to call that, future, we will have to reimagine it ground up. It cannot be in the same way as it is right now. Are we doing it right now? I don't know, because I'm not in that space. I'm not in the online learning space probably, but even when I see big announcements from companies like Reliance, we hear the same thing that Zoom is doing with the GeoMeet.
Reliance only does big announcement. You don't have to say Reliance and big announcement. Reliance is equal to big announcement. I don't think you can.
Yeah, okay, Anurag, we only have about 7 minutes left onto the show, so we'll also have to get to the rapid fire. So if you can expedite your answer.
Sure, I'll just complete the other part, Vineet. So yeah, I think from what I hear and the information that I have, stuff is happening in the tier 4, tier 5, tier 6 cities where ground level talukas, district collectors, district judges are essentially going out and distributing tabs, distributing mobile phones and ensuring everybody can get education. That does not get covered in our leading dailies at our news channels. So unfortunately, I think that news isn't there. But yes, of course, we are a very, very, very far distance away from there. And a lot more needs to be done by the government in that scenario.
You know, what Vineet and me would like you to do is to ask each of you, where will the economy be in the next 90 days, next 3 months? And we want a short answer. We'll start with you, Subbarao. Will the economy be worse? Will it be better? Next 3 months.
So because it's going to be a mixed bag, as I said, certain segments are sort of started. I mean, EdTech,
yes, and for that, give us a very definitive answer. Will it be worse in 90 days or better, or it'll stay tepid like now?
I mean, for the next 90 days, if we talk about pretty short term, I don't see any great upswing coming on, though it will show some signs of it. Yeah.
Thank you for that direct answer. Akshay, your response, economy in the next 90 days?
Quick answer, things changing by the day. I think 3 months is a very long time. Things will improve drastically. I'm very optimistic about it.
Don't be so, we still have 5 minutes, Akshay. We still have 5 minutes to the show.
Cool. So no, I'm very optimistic about it. I think I have seen in my space things changing. I've seen the sentiment improving on an every week basis, on an every month basis. So I see I don't see a scenario where 3 months will pass off and we essentially won't make more progress. Also, the second part to it is that even if we, God forbid, don't find a vaccine or don't find enough medical solutions towards the current pandemic that we are in the middle of, I think as a society, not just as Indians, I think globally, we have learned to live with the virus. You have seen in the world of entertainment, that's I think what we began with. We have seen shootings started to happen. We have seen people suddenly get out. I'm sure
that's a sector that's ravaged. Our next cover is on that sector, so I have some idea of how badly it's ravaged. Our filmmakers as friends.
But things moving very quickly.
Coming back in a way.
I'm very optimistic
because the cinema halls are closed. So they said both at the supply side and the demand side it's impacted. Devashish, your response on where the economy.
I'll just make one last comment, Anurag.
This point, yeah, go ahead, Akshay.
I'll just make one last comment. I think despite the fact that the economy will see an uptake and some will see a U curve, some will see a V curve, of course, all of those things. But let's not forget the fact that some things will remain changed forever. And the nature of work will completely change. So I don't see remote work completely going out. I see probably people going to office say 3 times in a day and saying that, hey, probably this meeting can happen over a Zoom. So some things are definitely changed forever. And I think that's better. Those have been accelerated. That progress for humankind has been accelerated.
Yeah, if you call it a progress. If you call it a progress, we believe you. Some things of it are definitely are. Devashish, economy in the next 90 days, very definitive answer, no hedging.
Okay, sure. So I think next 90 days it's going to be July. Like I'm sitting in July right now and it's still going to be July. The congestion is more in the internet. I think it's just like the old landline connections. Like you need to fix all those things and we can move faster. That's all what I believe because
what you're saying, 90 days, the economy won't improve. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir. It's going to be July and I just need a 5G connection coming up.
Status quo will prevail. Gayatri, same status quo.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think it is going to be status quo in the next 3 months at least. But post that, hopefully we'll see some revival in certain sectors. This is kind of an invitation for disruption. And this is, the new normal is inviting a lot of different types of businesses to come up and emerge very strong. However, unfortunately, most of the largest players on the market across industries have taken a terrible hit and job loss is just too tremendous to be able to see any significant revival in the next 3 months at least. Yeah.
I second what Gayatri has just said.
Okay.
Status quo.
Aditya?
So next 3 to 6 months, I think are going to be a struggle, just the way the last 3 months have been.
3 to 6 months. 6 months in December, we would have 14 November used to be, is now Diwali. It also happened to Children's Day. So you're saying in December, till December, it won't improve?
No, I think this will improve, but we'll continue to struggle. We'll continue to struggle. This is a lot of hard work ahead of all of us who are running businesses. But will it be better than what it is? Yes. But will it be back to where we were, let's say, in Jan and Feb? That's sometime away.
And what is that sometime?
That's what I'm saying, that look at around November, December for that to happen.
Okay. Shrikant, you started with you, we end with you.
So, Anurag, you said during the break that this is a panel of optimists. So I'm going to stick true to that promise. I believe that India makes the most progress when there's a crisis, and this crisis will create a cadre of world-beating companies from India. And I see it in 3 sectors, EdTech, MedTech, and e-commerce, where I'm advising a company each. It's not going to happen by magic. These companies have to be agile and aggressive. The companies I advise do a daily Zoom review, and I'm seeing the progress every day. I think we're going to create a cadre of world-beating companies, and I can see some of them on this call itself, so I'm totally optimistic.
Anurag, let's also get your point of view on this, like we always do. Anurag?
Thank you. I just would like to say that I believe in the power of India. I believe in the power of Indian entrepreneurs pivoting. We have always created more out of less, whether it was in ancient times or now. So I think, as they say, necessity is the mother of invention. We will be more innovative than others. But I agree with the panel. Mostly, I don't see the economy improving over the next 6 months substantially. Around Diwali, there may be some demand coming back, not to the level it comes back in a Diwali normally. But I think over the next 12, 18 months, we'll start going back to the kind of numbers that we've never seen or imagined.
Yeah.
Because intrinsically, India will become the center of the world for commerce. And I want to say this, and we will debate this on our show, that the Prime Minister vision of making, let's say, a certain place in Gujarat, the new financial hub of the world, which he started 6 years back, possibly will happen because there is a China phobia in the world. There is a China phobia in the world, and rightly so. I think India will be benefiting from it.
All right.
All yours.
On that optimistic and positive note, I'd like to thank everyone for being a part of this
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Hope
Thank
you're
you.
gonna
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NEWSX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.